The first time I watched my mother fold my wedding invitation into a church bulletin and lie to a room full of smiling women about why I was not there, I did not say a word. What I said 3 weeks later, in front of a probate attorney and a court mediator, is the reason she will never again use my name to control a room. My name is Noelle. I am 31, and I manage lease compliance for a property firm outside Columbus. I spend my days spotting small violations before they become expensive disasters. Looking back, I think that was always going to be my job. I was raised by a woman who built her whole life out of rules nobody was allowed to question. The first thing was the china cabinet key. It hung inside the pantry on a pink ribbon, always on the same hook. If cereal came off the wrong shelf, my mother would pull every box out and line them back up by height. I used to think mothers were born with private maps of the house. Hers just happened to be stricter than most. When I was 8, my cousin Wilder opened the cabinet during Easter because he wanted to see the gold-rimmed plates. My mother crossed the kitchen so fast the chair legs scraped the tile. She took his wrist, shut the cabinet, put the key back, and stood there breathing through her nose while the whole room froze. Then she smiled too brightly and told everyone dessert would be outside. Later, I heard my aunt ask my father, "How long are you going to keep pretending this is normal?" He answered, "Until getting through a holiday stops feeling like a victory." Back then, I only understood that our house had weather systems centered around my mother's comfort. The towels had assigned rods, the mugs had assigned hooks, the shoes by the door had to point outward. I turned it into a game. I could reset the entryway in under a minute. I thought helping was the same thing as keeping a family safe. By middle school, my father had stopped correcting her in front of people. My little brother Reed learned to watch her face before asking for anything. My grandmother sent casseroles with ingredients listed on masking tape because if they were not labeled, Mom would not serve them. At the time, I read all of it as care. Years later, I found another word for it: maintenance. Everyone was maintaining her, maintaining the peace, maintaining the rituals. Traditional was the word she used most at church. Our church was small, carpeted, and a fellowship hall that smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. My mother loved its predictability. The shelves were labeled. The potlucks had categories. She fit there so perfectly that nobody questioned. How often helpfulness turned into control. When I was 14, she took over the spring fundraiser after the old coordinator moved away. Within weeks, she had relabeled the kitchen, reassigned volunteers, and made a chart for where every pie should sit. People laughed about it. They called her thorough. They called her a blessing. Then one Sunday, Mrs. Talbot moved the raffle jar because children kept bumping it. My mother froze in the fellowship hall doorway with a tray of sandwiches in her hands. 10 minutes later, she was locked in the ladies' room, counting under her breath, while my father stood outside asking everyone to give her a minute. That should have been the moment I understood this was bigger than neatness. Instead, I absorbed the lesson every adult around me was teaching without meaning to. Protect her first, explain later, clean up quietly. The year my parents divorced, my father took me to a diner and told me, "Your mother needs a kind of help she will not agree to, and I am failing all of you by pretending I can make her accept it." I asked if he was leaving because of us. His face broke. "No, I stayed too long because of you." He moved out. Reed went with him every other week. My mother told everyone at church that my father had abandoned a godly household because modern men could not handle strong women. Women hugged her after service. Men praised her dignity. I stood beside her while she accepted sympathy like it had been arranged for her in advance. Still, I did not name what I was seeing. Not when she checked the stove knobs 5 times before bed. Not when she made my sister Hadley wash her hands until her knuckles cracked. Not when she called me in college to accuse me of taking a silver serving spoon I had never touched. And I spent an hour apologizing anyway. I met Griffin 2 years after graduation. He was patient in the unshowy way that matters more than flowers. He listened before speaking. He knew my mother was difficult long before I admitted how frightened I still was of disappointing her. When he proposed, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday in our kitchen while pasta boiled over and the smoke detector chirped. That is one reason I said yes so fast. Nothing about it felt staged. My mother cried when I told her. Then she gripped my arm hard enough to leave half moons in my skin and said, "Good, we can do this correctly." I should have heard the warning inside that word. At first, the trouble looked flattering. She offered to host the shower. She volunteered her church friends for flowers. She said she would help me honor my late grandmother by keeping family pieces safe until the wedding. Grandma Pearl had died the year before and left behind a lake cottage, a modest account, and a handwritten note asking that the cottage be sold and the money divided fairly among her grandchildren. Nothing in my mother's life stayed simple if she could turn it into leverage. She took possession of Grandma's veil, pearl earrings, and cake stand for safekeeping. Then she started making little comments that brides who marry without family guidance regret it, that a husband who truly loved me would not want me living so far from her, that once I had children I would understand why daughters should not drift. Then came the first real shift. At Sunday lunch, in front of my uncle, 2 church couples, and Hadley's boyfriend, my mother set down her fork and announced that Griffin and I had agreed to postpone the wedding so I could focus on family obligations. I laughed because it was so absurd I thought it had to be a joke. Nobody else laughed. She looked looked at me with that glassy calm I had known since childhood. You told me yourself you are overwhelmed. I told you work was busy, and your grandmother's estate is unsettled. It would be selfish to pour money into a wedding right now. There it was, public, soft, designed to make me sound childish if I pushed back. I stayed calm. I smiled. I said, "That is not true, Mom, but thank you for your concern." Then I stood up, took my purse, and left. By the time I reached my car, church women were texting that they were praying for my difficult season. Someone had already spread it. That night, Griffin found me on our kitchen floor with our save the dates around me like fallen cards. He read the messages, set my phone face down, and said, "She's testing whether your silence still belongs to her." I wish I could say I cut her off right there. I did not. Children raised inside someone else's rituals do not snap free in one brave moment. We inch, we bargain. So I let her stay involved, but I started changing the rules quietly. I moved the venue contracts into a private folder she could not access. I changed the florist password. I told the bakery to confirm changes only through me. I asked the church secretary not to share my schedule. That was my first adult act of silent revenge. Then Reed called me at work. "Did Mom tell you she's meeting with a lawyer about Grandma's cottage?" The room around me went still. "No. She told Hadley the cottage should stay in the family, which means you should move into it after the wedding. But not really you. You and Mom. She said Griffin would understand if he cared about family values." For a second I could not speak. Grandma wanted that cottage sold because none of us could afford to keep it. Everyone knew that. "Why would she think she gets to decide that?" I asked. Reed laughed without humor. "Because she's telling people she sacrificed her life taking care of Grandma, and now you owe her security." That was the moment something old and cold shifted inside me. Not because the claim surprised me, because it fit too neatly with everything I had seen as a child and called normal. My mother did not just want objects in the right place. She wanted people there too. If you are listening while driving home, folding laundry, or pretending not to check your family group chat, take a second to like, subscribe, and support the channel. Some stories take years to understand, and some take one phone call to make the whole pattern visible. All right, now let me take you back. 3 days after Reed called, my mother invited me to a planning dinner at the church hall. She said the women helping with my shower wanted to bless me. Against my better judgment, I went. The room was full. Not 6 women, not a dinner. Nearly 30 people, including my uncle, Hadley, 2 members of Grandma Pearl's Bible study, and a realtor who had once tried to list the cottage. There were white tablecloths, a sheet cake, and a display board covered in photos of me as a child. At the center was an enlarged picture of the cottage. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like missing a stair. My mother stood by the podium in a cream suit, one hand resting on the board like she was unveiling a donation. She smiled when she saw me. There she is, our girl. I knew instantly that I had walked into something planned before I was informed. And when the first person hugged me and whispered, "Your grandmother would be so happy you're keeping her home in the family," I realized it was much worse than sabotage. It was a campaign. I did not go to the podium. I did not make a scene. I stood there with my coat still on, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt, while my mother welcomed everyone to what she called a celebration of legacy, faith, and family stewardship. Then she introduced me as if I were already committed. "She has decided," my mother said, touching the framed photo of the cottage, "to delay all unnecessary spending and honor Pearl's memory by preserving the lake house for future generations." The room answered with approving little sounds, soft applause, nods, the kind of warm public agreement that makes the targeted person feel cruel for interrupting it. I looked at Hadley first. She would not meet my eyes. Then I looked at the realtor. He gave me the strained smile of a man who had figured out too late that he had been invited under false pretenses. My mother went on, voice syrup smooth. She talked about sacrifice, stability, the moral emptiness of selling heritage for convenience. Then she glanced at Griffin, who had come in behind me without anyone noticing, and added, "A good husband protects family values before private ambition." There it was. The public humiliation, the pile-on, the trap. My hands stopped shaking the second I realized something simple. She thought surprise still worked on me because it had always worked before. So I gave her the old version of me for exactly 1 minute longer. I sat down. I let 2 women squeeze my hand. I accepted a paper plate of lemon cake I did not want. And when my mother asked me to come say a few words, I stood up and said, "I'm overwhelmed by how much everyone cares about Grandma's memory. I'd like a little time to gather myself before I speak." People smiled at my restraint. My mother smiled too, because she mistook composure for surrender. Then I walked out to the parking lot with Griffin. He shut the fellowship hall door behind us and said, "Tell me what you need." I stared at the dark line of parked cars, at the reflected yellow windows, and felt 15 different years of confusion start snapping into place. "I need proof," I said. "Not emotion, not what she implied. Proof of what she's saying, who she's saying it to, and what she's trying to take." He nodded once. Then we stop reacting and start documenting. That week turned me into someone I should have become years earlier. At work, I was calm, efficient, rational. At night, I built a timeline. Every text where my mother hinted that the wedding was irresponsible. Every message from church women assuming I was moving into the cottage. Every voicemail from relatives saying they were proud I was choosing family over vanity. I asked Reed to send screenshots of what Mom had said in the family thread. He sent far more than I expected. Paragraphs about me being emotionally fragile. Claims that Griffin was pressuring me to cut ties. Suggestions that if I married quickly, I might lose the moral clarity to do what was right with Grandma's property. She was laying spiritual language over control the way some people spread a blanket over broken glass and call it a table. Then the second twist landed. My uncle Hartley called and asked if I had signed the occupancy agreement yet. I almost dropped the phone. What occupancy agreement? A silence. Then, carefully, your mother told me the attorney drafted something temporary. For the cottage, she said you agreed she'd stay there as caretaker until the estate finished. I sat down at my desk so fast my chair hit the wall. I never agreed to anything. He exhaled like a man backing away from a fire he had finally recognized. Then you need to call the attorney now. The probate attorney's office was 40 minutes away. I took a half day, drove there in sleet, and learned just how far she had pushed. There was no signed agreement. There was, however, a message in the file memorializing a phone call from my mother, claiming that all grandchildren supported postponing the sale because she had consensus authority to coordinate temporary use and preservation. She had not gotten what she wanted. She had planted a version of reality in professional ears and hoped it would harden into fact by repetition. I asked the attorney, a gray-haired woman named Camille, whether that could affect the estate. Camille folded her hands. Not if the actual heirs speak clearly and promptly, but confusion is useful to people who want time. That sentence sat in my chest like a struck bell. Confusion is useful. That was my childhood. That was every holiday, every church lunch, every apology extracted from the nearest person so the day could continue. Confusion had been the fog she lived inside and made the rest of us breathe. I left the office and called every grandchild myself. No drama, no insults, just facts. Grandma's written instruction had been to sell. No heir had signed anything. No caretaker plan existed. Please direct all questions to the attorney, not my mother. By dinner, the family chat had gone from cozy assumptions to clipped silence. By bedtime, my mother called 6 times. I let every call ring out. The next morning, she came to my apartment building. I saw her through the lobby glass, standing ramrod straight in a camel coat, blue mug in hand like she was delivering peace instead of pressure. My stomach tightened, but I did not go down. I told the front desk not to send her up. She texted, I brought soup. You're embarrassing me. Then, 5 minutes. Then, if Griffin is making decisions for you, say so now. I stared at that one the longest, not because it hurt, because it was useful. I forwarded it to myself, printed it, and added it to the folder. That evening, Hadley showed up instead. She looked exhausted, like somebody who had spent too long playing translator between truth and comfort. We sat at my kitchen counter. She twisted a napkin to threads and finally whispered, Mom's telling people if you sell the cottage, she might lose her volunteer housing arrangement through church. I frowned. What arrangement? Hadley swallowed. She told the pastor she planned to move into the cottage temporarily, rent out her house, and use that money to fund a women's ministry retreat program. She said it was your idea. For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. There it was, the practical front and the reputation front colliding. She was not just claiming property. She was wrapping it inside ministry so anyone who objected looked selfish. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Hadley's eyes filled. Because she wants me to read something at your shower this weekend about how family women carry each other when one loses her way. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the cruelty of it was so polished. You don't have to do that, I said. She'll say I abandoned her. She says that anyway. Hadley looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the child version of both of us. 2 girls trained to read one woman's breathing like weather reports. What if she falls apart? She whispered. The answer came out of me before I could soften it. Then maybe people will finally see that holding her up is not the same as helping her. Hadley cried, quietly, relieved and ashamed at the same time. I reached across the counter and held her hand. It felt like crossing a bridge I should have crossed years ago. Saturday came with hard rain and a low sky. The shower was at a private room in a hotel restaurant downtown, neutral territory, which meant my mother could not control the walls, only the guest list. When Griffin and I walked in, I saw immediately that she had invited extra people again. Church women, 2 family friends from my father's side, even my old college roommate who looked baffled to be there. Gift bags lined one table. A calligraphy sign with my name sat beside another framed photo of the cottage. The humiliation was no longer hidden inside manners. It was the theme. My mother embraced me in front of everyone and said loudly, "You look tired, sweetheart. Stress does strange things to judgment." I smiled. So does control. Her arms tightened for half a second before she let go. Lunch was served. Toasts began. One sweet story from a coworker. One awkward memory from a cousin. Then my mother rose with a folded paper in her hand. Every sound in the room changed. Silverware down, chairs still. Attention drawn like thread. She began with my childhood, my neatness, my reliability, how I had once understood duty before modern influences made me distant. A few women laughed softly at lines designed to sound affectionate while cutting underneath. Then she moved toward the point. A family home, she said, hand resting on the back of my chair, is not just lumber and debt, it is identity, and sometimes the people who love us have to guide us back to ourselves when outside voices cloud our priorities. She looked directly at Griffin on that last part. Then she said the thing that finished me with silence forever. She has agreed in principle to do what honors her grandmother. She just needs encouragement to follow through. I stood before she finished the sentence. Not fast, not shaking. Calm enough that half the room leaned in instead of recoiling. Actually, I said, that isn't true. My mother laughed a small warning laugh. Noelle, honey, not here. Yes, here. The room went so quiet I could hear rain ticking against the windows. I picked up the framed cottage photo from the table and set it flat, face down. Not dramatic, just decisive. Since this room keeps being used to announce decisions I never made, this seems like the right room to correct them. My mother's face changed. Not to anger first, to fear. Good. I took a folder from my bag. Inside were printed texts, copies of messages, a timeline, and a letter from the probate attorney clarifying the estate instructions and confirming that no heir had authorized occupancy, delay, or preservation control by my mother. I handed the first copy to the woman seated nearest me, then another to my uncle, then another to the pastor's wife. I am not keeping the cottage, I said. Grandma asked for it to be sold. I never promised my mother use of it. I never asked her to build a ministry around it. I never postponed my wedding. Those were stories told about me, not decisions made by me. Someone inhaled sharply. I kept going. My mother also contacted the attorney claiming consensus she did not have, told church members my fiancé was controlling me, and planned public events around pressuring me into compliance. My mother stood so abruptly her chair tipped backward. You ungrateful girl. There was the old script reaching for me. I did not take it. I turned to the room instead of to her. I am done confusing obedience with love. That line landed harder than anything else I said, because it was the truth sitting underneath every ritual, every holiday, every little family emergency turned theater. She had trained us to think peace meant she was comfortable. Hadley stood next. Her voice trembled, but it held. She asked me to read a statement today implying Noelle was unstable and being misled. I refused. Then my uncle spoke, then the realtor. Then, after a long, stunned minute, even my college roommate said, I came because I thought this was a bridal lunch. I didn't know it was an intervention. The social shift happened right in front of me, almost visible, like a room-changing temperature. My mother looked around for allies and found faces she no longer knew how to command. She grabbed her purse, straightened her jacket, and said, when this family collapses, do not ask me to help rebuild it. Then she walked out into the rain without her umbrella. Nobody followed. The fallout started before dessert. The pastor's wife quietly asked for the attorney's contact information. My uncle said he wanted all future estate communication in writing. The realtor apologized and admitted he had been approached informally about valuation timing. Hadley sat beside me and leaned her shoulder into mine like we were children again, except this time neither of us was waiting to see what mood entered the room. Griffin took my hand under the table. I squeezed back. 3 weeks later, the cottage sold. The proceeds were divided exactly as Grandma requested. My mother tried for a while to tell people she had been misunderstood, but documents are stubborn things, and so are witnesses who have finally lost the appetite for pretending. The church removed her from event coordination, not as punishment officially, as a need for rest and boundaries. Small-town language for the truth arriving late, but arriving all the same. Griffin and I moved our wedding to a botanical garden and kept it so small that no microphone was necessary. My father walked me down a gravel path lined with white roses. Hadley fixed my veil. Reed cried during the vows and blamed pollen. We used different plates, mismatched glasses, and folding chairs that wobbled on the grass. Nothing matched. Everything was beautiful. The final surprise came the Monday after the honeymoon. Camille called to say Grandma had left one more item in sealed personal effects that had only now been forwarded. A note tucked inside an old recipe tin. It was in Grandma's slanted handwriting, addressed to me. Noelle, you were never hard to love. Some people only know how to feel safe when the whole room bends around them. Do not bend your whole life. I read it twice in my office parking lot, then once more at home with Griffin listening from the doorway. All those years I thought growing up meant learning my mother was sicker than I understood as a child. What actually changed me was realizing that understanding her did not require surrendering to her, and once I finally learned that, the whole table shifted.